Dad's gone. Move! Those were the words my son shouted to the rescue ranger while I was trapped in a flash flood on a mountain road in Tennessee. The water had already risen to my waist. I thought he was coming back to save me. Instead, he grabbed a waterproof bag, stepped out of the rushing water, and left me behind. Then he unclipped the last line keeping me alive. As the freezing rain grew heavier, I realized the flood wasn't the real danger that night. If you found this channel today, I'm grateful. Seriously. Now let's start something. Comment below and tell me, where are you watching from? City, state, country? Let me see you. Quick note: portions of this story are fictional, shaped for both entertainment and meaningful reflection. Coincidences in names or settings are unintentional, but everything this story has to say to you matters deeply. It was a Tuesday evening in mid-October, one of those gray Ohio nights where the air smells like wet leaves and distant asphalt, and the sky goes from orange to black faster than you think it should. I had been driving that same stretch of Broad Street, heading west toward Fenwick Drive, for 31 years, knew every dip in the pavement, every timing pattern of every traffic signal between the Carter engineering offices and the house. I knew that intersection the way you know your own kitchen in the dark. Both hands on the wheel. Mind already halfway home. The light was green. I moved through it the way I had moved through it 1,000 times before. Then the gray truck came through the red from the left, and the world went sideways, and then it went away entirely. They told me later it took 11 minutes for the paramedics to reach the scene. They told me the impact had driven the driver's side door 18 inches into the cabin. They told me I was unresponsive on the stretcher, blood pressure dropping to a number that made the paramedics exchange the kind of look that means they are already adjusting what they expect from the next hour. What nobody told me, what nobody in that ambulance or that emergency bay could have possibly known, was that something inside the wreckage of my nervous system was still listening. That is the part that changes everything. I became aware of sound before I became aware of anything else. Not words at first, just frequencies. The rhythmic pulse of a monitor close to my right ear, the hiss of an oxygen line, the particular squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum. I had no sense of my body whatsoever, no pain, no weight, no awareness of limbs or position. Just sound rising and falling around me like a tide I was floating on without a vessel underneath me. Then voices began to separate themselves from the noise, pressures holding steady. A woman's voice measured calm, the kind of professional tone that comes from years of delivering difficult information in rooms where emotion has to wait its turn. Dr. Reeves wants another scan in the morning. Right now, we watch and we wait. How long could this go on? A second voice. Young, male, tight at the edges with something that was performing concern without quite being made of it. There's no reliable timeline with a TBI at this level. Days, possibly longer. Okay. A short breath. Okay, thanks. I had known that second voice for 31 years. It had learned to talk in the house on Fenwick Drive, in rooms I had built and paid for and filled with everything a child could need. It belonged to my son, Ethan. And it did not sound like a son standing at the edge of losing his father. It sounded like a man doing math. The hospital was Ohio Health Riverside Methodist. I wouldn't confirm that until weeks later, when I was conscious enough to read the letterhead on my discharge paperwork. But in those first submerged hours, the hospital was simply the world. The only world available to me, defined entirely by what I could hear without being able to move or respond or signal in any way that I was present. Nurse Patricia had a voice I came to rely on completely. I learned her name from the way Dr. Reeves addressed her during morning rounds, his measured baritone asking questions, her answers precise and steady. Patricia spoke to me directly, even when I showed no response. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. 6:15. Vitals are holding well. You've got a quiet day ahead of you." She said it the way you talk to someone in the next room, present, worth addressing, expected to hear you. I held on to Patricia's voice like a rope in dark water. She was the only person in that building who spoke to me like I was still entirely there. Emma arrived on the second day. I recognized her before she said a word, the quick, light footsteps, the particular energy of a 14-year-old who moves like she is always slightly late for something important. Then her voice not pulled tight, the way an adult manages grief, but raw and open and entirely unguarded. "Grandpa." Just that word, spoken to a man who could not respond with the certainty of someone who believes he can hear her anyway. "He's holding steady," Patricia said. "His numbers are encouraging. We're cautiously optimistic. He's going to be okay." Emma said it the way teenagers say things they have decided to be true. Not a question. A position. "I know he is." The monitor kept its steady rhythm, and somewhere in the part of me that was still functioning, still recording, still processing, still refusing to go dark, something that had been very cold grew very slightly warmer. Ethan came back that same evening with someone I didn't know. Heavier footsteps, slower, unhurried, the walk of a man who owns wherever he puts his feet. They stayed near the doorway, voices dropped to the register people use when they want privacy, in a space that doesn't offer it. "The doctors aren't giving any kind of timeline," Ethan said. "It could be weeks, and if the outcome isn't favorable," the second voice, deliberate, careful with its phrasing. The voice of someone who has learned to mean things without quite saying them directly. "Then we compress the schedule." Ethan's voice was flat and businesslike in a way that made the back of my neck want to tighten, would have if my neck had been available to. "The asset transfers are already structured. The board resolutions are ready to file. We don't need him conscious to move forward." A pause. "We just need him out of the way." The monitor beeped its steady, indifferent rhythm. The Ohio night pressed against the window I couldn't see. Patricia's shoes squeaked somewhere far down the corridor. "We just need him out of the way," my son's voice. That workmanlike flat calm, the calm of a man who had already decided that his father's life was a variable in a financial equation and had already solved for it before the body in the bed had finished deciding whether to live. I lay completely still, and I began in the only way still available to me to plan. By the third morning inside Ohio Health Riverside Methodist, I had stopped waiting for my body to come back and started working with what I had. What I had was hearing, sharp, compensating, pulling everything it could from the world, the way a man's remaining senses do when enough of the others go dark. Every voice in that room had become a frequency I could read. Every footstep carried a weight and a rhythm and a meaning. The ICU was a world I had mapped entirely through sound, and by day 3, I knew that world well enough to identify who had just turned the corner before they reached my door. That morning it was Ethan, earlier than usual. Fast, tight footsteps, the stride of a man who had somewhere to be and a reason to get there before anyone else arrived. "Good morning, Mr. Carter, your son is here to see you." Patricia's voice warm and professional coming from near the monitors. "He looks the same as yesterday," Ethan said. Not a question, not grief, an inventory. "His numbers are actually trending up a little," Patricia said. "That's a good sign." A short beat. "Could you give us a few minutes alone?" Patricia's shoes made their familiar sound crossing to the door. The latch clicked, and Ethan let out a long breath, the private, unguarded kind that a person holds until they are absolutely certain no one clinical is left in the room. "Okay." His voice dropped to boardroom register low, direct, the tone he used when he wanted authority without volume. "Here's where things stand, Dad." My numbers stayed flat on the monitor. Every ounce of discipline I had built across 69 years, the discipline of a man who had learned to hold his face still when the other side of the table thought they had him cornered, I pushed it all into keeping those readings exactly where they were. "The attorneys finished the draft board resolution last night," Ethan continued. He was moving, pacing a slow circuit near the window from the sound of it. "It names me acting primary authority pending your recovery or pending a change in your status. I'm keeping it outside the normal legal channels for now. Robert doesn't know, and I need it to stay that way. A pause. The fund transfers are staged through the Nevada entities. Once the resolution is filed, the money moves within 48 hours. Clean. No trail back to us. The monitor beeped. I breathed. I did not move. I just need you to stay where you are a little longer, Ethan said. His voice had gone quieter, and underneath the calculation, something moved that might have been real, a thread of genuine feeling, woven through the strategy, too thin to change anything, but thick enough to be heard. I know how this sounds. I do. But this is the only way to make sure everything ends up where it belongs. Where it belongs. The company I had built from a rented 2-room office. The 47 people who showed up every morning because I had given them a reason to. 31 years of decisions and early mornings and reinvested earnings, and my son standing 3 feet from my body, talking about it like inventory to be sorted after a sale. My eyes burned behind their closed lids. Not from tears. From the grinding, sustained effort of holding still when every instinct I had left was screaming at me to sit up. Olivia came on the afternoon of day 4, when the ward had gone quiet, and the light through the window had turned warm and low and golden, the way October light does when the angle drops, and everything it touches looks older than it is. She sat in the chair beside the bed, close enough that I could hear her breathing. For a while she simply sat, and the quality of her presence was different from Ethan's. Heavier. Like a woman carrying something she had already decided to put down, but hadn't yet found the exact moment for. Then her voice came out carefully. Small. The voice of someone choosing their footing on uncertain ground. I signed the DNR this morning, she said. Dr. Reeves explained it as the compassionate option. He said that if there's no meaningful progress by end of week, continuing aggressive measures might cause more suffering than it prevents. A breath unsteady at the edges. Ethan said, it's what you always wanted. That you told him you never wanted to be kept alive by machines. I had said no such thing. Not once. Not to Ethan, not to anyone who had ever asked. I need you to know I didn't do it lightly. Her voice cracked on the last word, not dramatically, just a small, honest fracture, the sound of a woman who has convinced herself she is doing the right thing and needs the silence of an unconscious man to confirm it. I thought about it, William. I really did. The monitor kept its rhythm. I kept mine. And what moved through my chest in that moment was not rage. Rage would come later, would build itself into something with edges and purpose, but something older and quieter. The specific grief of a man who understands for the first time that the people who were supposed to stand between him and the worst thing are the ones who opened the door to let it in. On the night of day 5, someone came in after visiting hours. Not Ethan. Not Olivia. Lighter footsteps, careful hesitating just inside the door, the way someone does when they are not supposed to be there and know it. A man I was certain of that from the weight and rhythm who had entered this room, with the specific deliberate care of someone who had checked the corridor first. He stood near the foot of my bed. I counted his breaths, 8 of them slow and uneven, the breathing of a man working up to something. Then very quietly he said, "I'm sorry, William. I should have come to you sooner." That was all. The footsteps retreated. The door clicked shut, and I was alone again with the monitor and the hiss of the oxygen line and the darkness pressing against the window. I turned that voice over in my mind for the rest of the night, ran it against every voice in my memory, the way you run your hand along a wall in the dark, searching for the switch. I couldn't place it. Not yet. But I filed it exactly where I had filed everything else I had gathered in that room across 5 days of lying still, carefully, precisely ready to be used. On the morning of day 6, I opened my eyes, not because my body had finally decided on its own, not because some reflex broke through without my consent. I opened them because I had heard enough, gathered enough, understood enough. And 69 years of building things from scratch had taught me that there is one right moment to let the other side know you are still in the room. Still in the game, still in the fight. Still very much the man whose name is on the door. That moment was now. Ethan knocked on my door on a Thursday evening in early December, and that alone was unusual, because my son rarely stopped by without a specific reason. I was in the kitchen making dinner when I heard the knock. Something about the rhythm of it felt different, 3 short raps, too deliberate, too evenly spaced. Not the way a man knocks when he just wants to see his father. More like the way a man knocks when he has already rehearsed what he's going to say on the drive over. I opened the door, and there they were. Ethan in a button-down shirt I had never seen before, collar ironed sharp. Olivia beside him in a burgundy blouse, her hair done, her smile already fully assembled before I even said hello. Ethan was holding a white pastry box. Olivia had a bottle of Merlot tucked under her arm. "Dad." Ethan stepped forward and hugged me, a real hug, both arms longer than usual. My chest tightened for a reason I couldn't name. "This is a surprise," I said, stepping back to let them in. "We were in the neighborhood." Olivia kissed my cheek as she walked past. Her perfume was something expensive and unfamiliar. "We thought, why not stop by and spend some time with you?" It's been too long. It had been 6 weeks since I'd seen either of them in person. I didn't mention that. We sat in the living room. Olivia poured the wine without being asked, handling my glasses like she had done it 100 times, which she hadn't. Ethan opened the pastry box cannolis from that Italian bakery on 5th Street, the one my wife Margaret used to love. My throat tightened at the sight of them. "How have you been, Dad?" Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching me with an expression of focused concern that felt slightly too focused, slightly too concerned. "Same as always," I said. "Quiet. That's what worries me." He exchanged a glance with Olivia, fast, barely a half second, the kind of glance couples share when they've agreed on something beforehand. "You're out here alone all the time. It can't be good for you." "I'm 69, not 90, I said. "I go to the hardware store. I read. I call Emma on Sundays. I manage." Olivia laughed softly. "William, nobody doubts that you manage. You've always been the most capable man in any room." She said it warmly, but there was something underneath the warmth, the faint metallic taste of a compliment that was building towards something else. Ethan cleared his throat. "Actually, Dad, that's kind of why we're here." He reached over and squeezed Olivia's hand once, then looked back at me. "We want to take you to Gatlinburg for Christmas. The cabin. All of us together, you, me, Olivia, and Emma." I set my wineglass down. The cabin. Margaret and I had built that place with our own hands, well, with contractors and our own savings, and 3 summers of weekends spent driving nails and painting trim and arguing lovingly over where to put the kitchen window. We had taken Ethan there every Christmas until he was 17, when he decided Christmas with his friends was more important. I hadn't blamed him. That's what 17-year-olds do. But I hadn't been back since Margaret died. 3 years. The cabin had been sitting up there in the Tennessee mountains, empty, gathering dust, and aching with memory. "The cabin," I said. "Just like the old days, Dad." Ethan's voice softened, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw the boy underneath the man. The 10-year-old who used to wake me at 5 in the morning, on the first day of Christmas vacation, vibrating with excitement. "You always said we should go back someday." My eyes stung, and I blinked it away quickly. "I did say that. Emma's already excited," Olivia added, leaning forward. "She called Ethan last week asking if Grandpa was coming to anything for Christmas. She misses you." Her eyes were soft and liquid and perfectly calibrated to hit exactly where they needed to hit. My granddaughter, 14 years old, and already more honest than most adults I had ever known. The thought of Emma sitting in that back seat bouncing up in the mountains, her face lit up the way Margaret's face used to light up when the Great Smokies first appeared on the horizon. "All right," I said. Ethan's face broke into a grin, a wide, genuine-looking grin. "Yeah, one condition." I pointed at him. "We do it right. We stop at that barbecue place outside Knoxville that your mother loved, and we don't rush the drive. Deal." He reached over and clapped my shoulder, and his hand was warm and solid and felt like my son's hand. It felt real. I wanted it to be real so badly that I chose to let it be real. We finished the wine. We ate the cannolis. Ethan told a story about Emma's school play that made me laugh until my eyes watered. Olivia refilled my glass without asking and smiled at me over the rim of hers, and the smile reached all the way to her eyes, or appeared to. When they stood to leave, Ethan hugged me again at the door, that same long, two-armed hug. I patted his back the way I used to when he was small and frightened and needed to know the world wasn't ending. "This is going to be good, Dad," he said into my shoulder. "I promise." After they drove away, I stood at the window and watched their taillights disappear around the corner. The house felt very quiet. I picked up the half-empty wine glass from the coffee table and held it for a moment. Something had been sitting at the edge of my awareness all evening, shapeless, too vague to grab hold of. While Ethan talked, I had watched his hands. He'd checked his phone twice under the table, both times angling the screen away from me before turning it face down. Olivia had excused herself to use the bathroom midway through the evening and had been gone for nearly 8 minutes. When she came back, she walked past my study doorway and paused. Just for a second. One beat too long, her eyes moving across the room before she continued down the hall. I told myself it meant nothing. People check their phones. People pause in doorways. I carried the glasses to the kitchen, rinsed them, and set them in the rack. Then I walked to the living room, picked up the framed photograph of Margaret from the shelf, and looked at her face for a long time. She was laughing in the photo, caught mid-laugh at some family barbecue, her head thrown back, completely unself-conscious. "What do you think?" I asked her quietly. She kept laughing. She always kept laughing, frozen there in that perfect, uncomplicated moment. I set the photo back down, turned off the lights, and went to bed feeling warm in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. I didn't notice until much later that when I checked the cabinet above my desk the next morning, the folder where I kept copies of property documents was sitting at a slightly different angle than I had left it. The SUV pulled out of Columbus at 7 in the morning on December 20th, cold and clear, the kind of winter morning that makes everything look scrubbed clean, like the world had been rinsed overnight and hung out to dry. I sat in the front passenger seat, which Ethan had insisted on. Emma was behind me, bundled in an oversized yellow sweater, her knees pulled up against the back of my seat, already talking. Olivia drove the first leg. Ethan had his coffee, his playlist, his mood, which was good deliberately and consistently good in the way that people are sometimes good when they are working at it. "Grandpa?" Emma tapped the back of my headrest. "Tell me the story about when you and Grandma first found the land." "The version where she fell in the creek." Olivia laughed from the driver's seat. "There's a version where she fell in a creek. There's always been a version where she fell in the creek," I said, and Emma cackled with delight. So I told the story. It was 1991, deep summer land prices in Sevier County, still cheap enough that a civil engineer and his schoolteacher wife could scrape together a down payment on 40 acres of nothing. We had hiked the property with a real estate agent who kept slipping on wet leaves and apologizing, and Margaret had been charging ahead of everyone, fearless the way she always was, pointing at things and saying, "That's where the porch goes, and we'll put a fire pit right there." And then she'd walked straight off the edge of a low bank into a shin-deep creek and come up sputtering and laughing so hard she could barely stand. Emma was folded almost double with laughter. Even Ethan grinned in the rear view. "She came up out of that water," I said, with creek mud on her face and a handful of wet leaves in her hair. and she looked at me and said, "William, we are buying this land." "And you did," Emma said, still grinning. "We did." The miles rolled under us. Kentucky opened up wide and flat on either side of the interstate. Brown fields interrupted by water towers and grain elevators and the occasional billboard for a personal injury attorney. Emma kept her phone out, filming things out the window, a hawk sitting on a fence post, a gas station shaped inexplicably like a barn, the long flat horizon. "I'm making a road trip video," she announced. "For school. Documentary style. Make sure I'm in it," I told her. "You're already in it." She turned the phone toward me. "Say something." "Something," she groaned. "Grandpa." "Fine." I looked into the camera. This is my granddaughter Emma, who has been making me feel old and delighted in equal measure since she was 4 years old. Emma laughed and pulled the phone back. I heard her say quietly, but clearly into the microphone, "That's my grandfather, William Carter. He built a cabin with his own hands. I want to be like him when I grow up." My chest did something complicated. For a while after that, I was quiet, the comfortable kind, the kind that doesn't need filling. I watched the landscape shift as we crossed into Tennessee, the ground beginning to lift and roll and the tree lines thickening. I noticed Ethan's hand tighten on his coffee cup when his phone buzzed in the cup holder. He looked at the screen, then at Olivia. Something passed between them, not words, just that half-second voltage that moves between two people who are keeping the same secret. He declined the call and set the phone face down. "Work?" I asked. "Nothing important." He glanced at me and smiled. The smile was fast. His jaw was tight underneath it. I turned back to the window. 2 hours later, we stopped for lunch at a diner outside Cookeville vinyl booths, sweet tea in mason jars, a pie case rotating slowly near the register, like a museum exhibit of better times. Emma ordered a cheeseburger and ate with the focused dedication of someone who had been waiting for it for 300 miles. Olivia was on her phone under the table, which I noticed, but didn't remark on. Ethan talked about a project at work, something about a commercial renovation downtown, and I asked questions and he answered them, and we sounded from a distance exactly like a father and son on a holiday road trip. Back in the car, the mountains appeared. I had forgotten somehow, or maybe I had protected myself from remembering the particular way the Great Smoky Mountains show themselves. Not all at once. They appear at the edge of the horizon first, just a darkening, a heaviness, a suggestion. Then they grow. Then they're everywhere, ridge after ridge, layered in blue-gray haze, ancient and enormous, and completely indifferent to everything happening in the valley below. "There they are," I said without meaning to say it out loud. Emma pressed her face to the window. "Grandpa, they look like a painting." They did. They looked like the painting Margaret had hung above our fireplace, a print she'd bought at a craft fair in Gatlinburg, on our second trip up a watercolor of the valley in early morning fog. I had looked at that painting 10,000 times in 30 years. Now the painting was outside the window, and Margaret was not, and the gap between those two facts was wide enough to fall into. I pressed my fingers against the cold glass. "Your grandmother loved this drive," I said. Emma reached forward from the back seat and put her hand on my shoulder, and the weight of it, small and warm and entirely without agenda, was the most honest thing I'd felt all day. In the front seat, Ethan checked his phone again. This time, he didn't put it face down. He held it in his lap and typed something with his thumb, angling the screen slightly away from me. I watched his reflection in the passenger side window. The deliberateness of the angle, the speed of his typing, the way he slid the phone into his door pocket instead of the cup holder when he was done. I didn't ask who he was texting. Instead, I looked back out at the mountains, at those ancient smoke-colored ridges rolling away into the distance, and I let myself feel the full weight of arriving somewhere that held 30 years of memory. And I told myself that whatever was pulling at the edges of this day, it could wait. The mountains had waited longer than any of us. They would still be there when the answers came. The mountains swallowed us whole somewhere around mile marker 47 on Newfound Gap Road, and the sky, which had been merely gray and brooding all afternoon, turned the color of a bruise. Ethan. I leaned forward in my seat, pressing my hand against the dashboard. Pull over. We're almost there, Dad. 30 minutes, maybe less. Look at that sky. He looked. His jaw tightened. It's just clouds. It was not just clouds. I had spent 35 years reading weather on job sites, knowing when to pull workers off scaffolding, when to ground equipment, when the sky was making a promise it intended to keep. The clouds rolling over the ridge to our left were the deep purple-green of serious weather, moving fast, stacking on top of each other the way clouds do when they mean business. The radio crackled. An automated voice cut through Emma's playlist, flat, toneless, and impossible to ignore. The National Weather Service has issued a flash flood warning for Sevier County and surrounding areas of the Great Smoky Mountains. Significant rainfall expected through midnight. Residents and visitors in low-lying areas and mountain roads should seek higher ground immediately. Ethan reached over and turned the volume down. My head snapped toward him. Don't do that. It's fine, Dad, we're almost... Turn it back up, now. A beat of silence. His jaw tightened. Then slowly, he turned it back up with the particular reluctance of a man who has just been caught doing something he cannot explain away. He turned it back up. The automated voice finished its warning and looped back to the beginning. Emma had gone very still in the back seat, her phone lowered, her eyes moving to the window. Grandpa, she said quietly, should we be worried? We should be smart, I told her. Then I looked at Ethan. There's a motel back in Gatlinburg 20 minutes downhill. We go back, we get rooms, we come up tomorrow when the weather clears. Simple. It'll clear by the time we reach the cabin. Ethan's voice had a new edge to it, not quite irritation, something harder and more deliberate underneath. The forecast said isolated showers, not a flood. That forecast was from this morning. I pointed through the windshield at the wall of darkness building over the next ridge. That is not isolated showers. Olivia turned around from the passenger seat, and her smile was the careful, practiced smile of someone managing a difficult situation. William, I hear you truly, but we've been driving for 7 hours. Emma's exhausted, we're all exhausted, and the cabin is right there. We can be inside with a fire going in half an hour. She paused, then added softly, wouldn't it be nice to wake up there tomorrow morning, the way you and Margaret used to? My chest clenched at Margaret's name in her mouth. The road narrowed. The trees on either side pressed closer, their branches weaving overhead into a ceiling that turned the last of the afternoon light, greenish and strange. The first real drops hit the windshield. Not rain, yet warning shots. Fat and heavy, the kind that come before the kind that comes. Ethan's phone buzzed in the cup holder. He glanced down. His whole body changed, shoulders pulling back, neck stiffening, something that was not quite fear and not quite urgency moving through him like a current. He declined the call with his thumb and shoved the phone into the door pocket. Who keeps calling you? I asked. Nobody important. Somebody important enough to call 3 times in 2 hours. It's a work thing, Dad. His voice came out sharper than he intended. He caught it, softened it. Just a contractor who can't make a decision without hand-holding. Nothing to worry about. I watched the side of his face. The muscle in his jaw was working, pulsing, the way it used to when he was 15 and lying to me about where he'd been. I knew that jaw. I had watched it grow from a baby's soft cheek into a man's sharp angle, and I knew every expression it had ever made. That jaw was not talking about a contractor. A crack of thunder rolled across the mountains, not directly overhead yet, but close enough that Emma flinched and grabbed the back of my headrest. Ethan, I want you to turn around. I kept my voice level. 69 years had taught me that men like Ethan, who have made up their minds about something, respond better to calm than to alarm. I am asking you directly. Turn the car around. Dad! He gripped the wheel harder, knuckles whitening. We're fine. I grew up in these mountains same as you. You grew up visiting these mountains in July. This is December, these are flash flood conditions, and I am a structural engineer who has seen what water does to mountain roads. I put my hand on his arm. Son, please. For just a moment, one breath, maybe two, something moved across Ethan's face. Something that looked like it might crack open into the real thing, into the sun underneath the plan, into the boy who used to take my hand on the scary parts of hiking trails. His chin dipped slightly. His grip on the wheel loosened by a fraction. Then his phone buzzed again. He looked at it once, just once, and whatever had been softening in him went hard again. "We're not turning around," he said. Emma's voice came from the back seat, small and careful. "Dad, Grandpa sounds really sure about this." "Emma, put your seatbelt tighter and don't worry about it. My seatbelt is already tighter." The rain came then, not gradually, not politely. It came all at once, the way mountain storms do, a full curtain of water, dropping from the sky like someone had cut a rope. The windshield wipers slapped uselessly at the downpour. Visibility dropped to 20 feet, then 15. The headlights caught nothing but white noise and the slick black ribbon of road curving ahead. Water was already running across the asphalt, thin sheets, at first then threads, then a continuous moving skin of it that caught the headlights and shimmered. On my side of the road, a drainage ditch that had been dry an hour ago was now carrying a fast brown current. I had my hand braced on the dashboard. My heart was hammering in a way I hadn't felt since my last job site emergency, a controlled terror, the kind that sharpens you instead of breaking you, every sense pushed to its outer edge. "Slow down," I said. "I am slowed down." More. The road curved left, then dropped, and in the sweep of the headlights, I saw it. The right shoulder had crumbled, eaten away by runoff, a 2-foot section of asphalt, simply gone a dark gap where the road used to be. Ethan yanked the wheel left. The SUV fishtailed on the wet road rear end, swinging wide, and Emma screamed just one sharp sound, cut off immediately as Ethan corrected and the tires found grip again. We all held our breath. Then Ethan let out a shaking laugh, the kind that isn't funny. "See, fine. We're fine. We nearly went off the road," I said. My voice came out steady. I was grateful for that. "But we didn't, Ethan." I turned to face him fully, and I let him see my face, not anger, not panic, something more serious than either. "If something happens up here, no one knows where we are. There's no cell signal. There's no shoulder left on half this road. Turn around." He didn't answer. He drove. And up ahead through the curtain of rain, the headlights caught something that made my stomach drop straight through the floor of the car. A brown river of water pouring across the road from the hillside above, carrying rocks and branches and mud, moving fast. Moving dark, moving like it had somewhere urgent to be. "Stop the car," I said. This time he stopped. Ethan stopped the SUV 10 feet from the water crossing the road, and for a moment, the only sounds were the rain hammering the roof, and Emma's breathing behind me, quick and shallow. The headlights lit up the flood sheet, moving across the asphalt. Maybe 8 inches deep, maybe 10, hard to tell from inside the car, but moving with that flat, deceptive speed that every engineer knows is more dangerous than it looks. 3 inches of fast water can knock a man off his feet. 8 can take an SUV. Okay. Ethan's voice was different now. The manufactured calm had cracked. "Okay, we'll wait for it to pass." "It won't pass," I said. "Not for hours, not in this rain." His phone buzzed again. This time he picked it up, read the screen, and the color left his face so completely that even in the darkness of the car I could see it happen. "Who is that?" I asked. "Nobody." "Ethan, Dad, give me a minute." He pressed the phone to his ear, turned his shoulder toward the window. I know we hit a water crossing. No, it's not." His voice dropped to something I couldn't make out over the rain. I looked at Olivia. She was staring straight ahead at the water in the headlights, and her hands folded in her lap were completely still. Not frightened still, waiting still. the stillness of someone who has already calculated outcomes. A sound from above, a low rumble different from thunder coming from the hillside to our right. I knew that sound. "Everyone out of the car," I said. "Right now." "Dad." "Out of the car, Ethan. That hillside is moving." The rumble grew. Emma made a sound in her throat, not quite a word, not quite a scream. Olivia's composure broke for the first time, and she said, "Oh, God." The rock came down, not a boulder, a slab, half the face of the shoulder above us, releasing all at once, and it hit the road 20 feet ahead, and the shockwave traveled through the asphalt and into the frame of the SUV and into my bones. The car jolted sideways. The rear left tire dropped into the drainage ditch, and the whole vehicle tilted, engine lurching, and then the engine died, in the sudden quiet rain. Then a light from the other side of the water crossing, strong directional, a rescue spotlight. A park ranger vehicle on the far bank, lights going, and a figure climbing out into the rain. "Hey!" A man's voice carrying across the water. "Is everyone okay? Can you hear me?" "We're okay!" I shouted back. I had my door open already, the cold rain hitting me like a wall. "We've got 4 people, 1 vehicle in the ditch." The ranger. I could see him in pieces through the rain, and his own spotlight was young, broad-shouldered, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone trained for exactly this situation. He disappeared behind his truck and came back carrying a rescue pack. "The water's too high for me to cross on foot," he called. "I'm throwing you a line. There's an emergency kit attached. Grab it when it comes over." The rescue rope came across in an arc, weighted at the far end, and landed on the road in front of the SUV. I grabbed it, pulled the bright orange emergency kit bag free, and passed the line back toward Ethan. "Olivia first," I said. "Emma second. Then you. I'll anchor the line." Olivia had her door open. She took the rope in both hands, looked at the water crossing maybe 15 feet of fast brown current, and without a word, she went into it. The ranger on the far side kept the line taut. She made it across, stumbling out on the far bank and grabbing the ranger's outstretched hand. "Emma." I turned to my granddaughter. Her face was white, her eyes enormous, but her chin was up. "You hold that rope with both hands, and you don't let go. You hear me?" "I hear you, Grandpa." Her voice shook, but her hands didn't. She went. She made it. I turned to Ethan, who had climbed out of the car and was standing in the rain beside me, and I held the rope out to him. "Your turn." That was when the second rockfall came, smaller than the first, but more precise, a cascade of stone and wet earth from the slope directly behind the SUV, and one piece caught me across the left shin with enough force to put me down on one knee. My leg buckled. Pain shot up through my hip like electricity. When I tried to stand, the foot wouldn't hold. My boot was pinned, the ankle wedged between a rock and the root of a tree that had come down with the debris. "Dad?" Ethan's voice cracked. He grabbed my arm. "Dad, are you?" "I'm stuck." I got my hands under me and pushed. The boot didn't move. "I need the jack from the back of the car." The hydraulic one left side of the cargo bay. Ethan turned toward the car. The water on the road was rising. I could feel it now, cold around my planted knee, moving fast. The orange emergency kit bag was still over my shoulder. I pressed my free hand against the tree root and focused on keeping my upper body above the waterline. "Ethan," the ranger's voice from across the water. "You need to move. That slope's still loose up there." "I've got to get my father free," Ethan shouted back. He went around to the rear of the SUV, and I heard him open the cargo bay. Heard him moving things. The water was at my thigh now. Cold beyond cold, the kind that starts stealing the feeling from your extremities within minutes. I gritted my teeth and kept my eyes on my son. Ethan came back around the side of the SUV. He was not carrying the hydraulic jack. He was carrying a black waterproof bag, flat rectangular, sealed with a yellow buckle. I had not seen Ethan load the rear of the car that morning. By the time I came out with my bag, the hatch was already closed. I had not thought to ask what was inside. His hands were shaking. His eyes went from the bag to my pinned foot, to the rope, to the far bank. where Olivia stood watching with both hands pressed to her mouth. "Ethan," my voice came out lower than I intended. "Put that bag down and get the jack." He didn't move. "Son," the water crept higher. "Get the jack." Something was happening in his face, a war I was watching from the outside. A man pulling against himself in two directions, and I could see it every second of it, and it was the worst thing I have ever seen in 69 years of living. Because I knew, watching his face, which direction he was going to go before he went there. He grabbed the rope. He clipped the waterproof bag to the front of his jacket. He stepped into the water. I heard him say it clear, carrying over the rain, aimed at the ranger on the far bank. "Dad's gone. Move." The rope went taut as he pulled himself across. I watched him reach the other side. I watched the ranger grab his arm and haul him up. I watched Olivia reach for the bag clipped to his chest before she even asked if he was hurt. Then the rope went slack. I looked down. The carabiner that had been anchoring the line to the SUV's roof rack, the one Ethan had clipped himself, was unclipped. Hanging open, released. The rope drifted away downstream. The water was at my waist. I put both hands on the tree root above me and held on, and I looked across the water at my son, and the thing that moved through me then was not what I expected. Not rage. Not even grief, not yet, that would come later in the long, dark hours of a hospital room. What I felt holding on to that root in the cold and the dark with the water rising was something quieter and more terrible than either. I felt the precise moment a man understands that his world has been smaller than he thought, and larger and lonelier, and still somehow worth holding on to. So I held on. The tree saved my life. And I want to be precise about that. Not God, not luck, not some vague cosmic intervention, but physics. 35 years of structural engineering taught me that forces behave according to rules, and the rules do not make exceptions for heartbreak. The second tree came down from the ridge above, larger than the first, a white oak with a trunk as wide as my chest, and it hit the SUV broadside with a sound like a cannon going off. The impact drove the front end of the vehicle sideways, and the rear end swung out and caught the mound of rock and debris that was pinning my ankle and the lever principle. The oldest principle in engineering, the one Archimedes understood 2,000 years ago, did the rest. The debris shifted. My foot came free. The water took me immediately. Not violently, that's what people get wrong about floods. There's no dramatic tossing, no Hollywood tumbling. The current simply wraps around you with enormous, quiet authority and begins moving you where it wants you to go. And the only thing that matters in that first second is whether you have something to grab. I had the tree root. My left hand found it before my mind consciously knew what was happening. Pure reflex, the body doing what it must. I swung into the current and held both hands locked around wet bark face in the water for one terrible second before I found the angle and pulled myself up, coughing water out of my lungs, ribs aching with the effort. The emergency kit bag was still over my shoulder. I pressed my cheek against the tree trunk and breathed. Rain hammered my back. The cold was extraordinary, the kind that stops being a sensation and becomes a condition, a fact about the universe as impersonal as altitude. Think, I told myself. You are an engineer. Think. I looked up. The rock face to my right was broken and raw from the rockfall, but above the debris line, maybe 8 feet up, I could see a hock of granite jutting out from the cliff face, a natural granite overhang, a broad, flat shelf that would sit above any conceivable floodline. Dry. Sheltered. 8 feet. I was 69 years old, with a left ankle that had just been pinned under a rock, a body temperature dropping by the minute, and a black waterproof bag to carry. 8 feet had never been so far in my life. "Carter," I said out loud, because sometimes you need to hear your own name to remember who you are. "Move." I moved. Every handhold was pain. The ankle screamed every time I put weight on it. 3 times I nearly lost my grip, and each time my hands found something, a crack, a root, a ledge edge barely wide enough for my fingers. When I finally pulled myself over the lip of the granite shelf and rolled onto solid flat rock, I lay there on my back for a full minute, staring up at the underside of the overhang, rain sheeting off its lip 6 inches in front of my face. Then I sat up and opened the emergency kit bag. "Okay," I said to no one. "Let's see what we have." A flashlight. LED military-grade full charge. A Mylar emergency blanket folded into a square the size of a paperback book. 4 chemical heat packs, the kind you crack and shake to activate. A first aid kit. A waterproof box containing matches. A whistle. A length of paracord. And at the very bottom, tucked into a side pocket, a laminated card. Emergency contacts for the Smokies Ranger District. Name at the top, Jake Mercer, Station Chief. I stripped my jacket and shirt off. The cold hit my bare chest like a slap, and I made a sound that was half gasp and half something I am not ashamed to admit was close to a sob, not from pain, from the shock of the temperature, differential from the pure animal reality of my situation. A 69-year-old man alone on a rock shelf in the Great Smoky Mountains on the worst night of his life. "Margaret," I said, pulling the Mylar blanket open with hands that shook hard enough to make the foil crinkle and flash in the dark. "You would have had something funny to say about this. I know you would have." She would have. She would have said something like, "William, only you would get abandoned on a mountain by your own son and immediately start problem-solving." And she would have been right, and I would have laughed, and it would have helped. I wrapped the Mylar blanket around my shoulders. The material caught the flashlight beam and threw it back in fractured silver pieces. I cracked 2 of the chemical heat packs. One went inside the blanket against my chest, one against the left side of my rib cage where my core temperature was dropping fastest. The warmth hit within 30 seconds. Modest warmth, not enough warmth, but enough. I cracked the 3rd heat pack and pressed it carefully around my left ankle. It was swelling inside the boot. I could feel the pressure, but the boot itself was acting as compression. I left it on. Removing it would release the swelling, and I would lose the joint entirely. The 4th heat pack I saved. Smart, I told myself. That's the smart call. For a long time, maybe an hour, maybe 2, time moved strangely in the dark. I sat against the rock face with my knees pulled up and listened to the mountain. The rain gradually changed character, losing its furious edge and settling into something more steady and sustainable. The water below me roared and churned. Somewhere far down the ridge, a tree cracked and fell. I thought about Ethan, not with anger. Anger would have been easier. I thought about him the way you think about a building that has failed, with the particular grief of a man who designed it, who chose the materials, who reviewed the specifications, who somehow missed the flaw that was there from the beginning. Where had it gone wrong? When had my son become someone capable of stepping over me into a rescue rope and letting the carabiner go? Had I been too absent when he was young, too focused on job sites and project timelines? Had Margaret carried too much of the raising while I carried the income? Had we given him too much or not enough, or the wrong things at the wrong times? Dad's gone. Move. My throat tightened until it hurt. I pressed the back of my hand against my mouth and breathed through my nose 4 counts and 4 counts out, the same technique I used on job sites when a worker got hurt, and I needed to think clearly before I could afford to feel anything. Then I picked up the laminated card and looked at the name again. Jake Mercer. I had heard that name. I was certain of it, not recently, not in any context I could immediately place, but it was in my memory, somewhere attached to something important. Mercer. Mercer. I could not find it. The cold and the exhaustion had my mind working at reduced capacity, like a computer running on backup power. But the certainty remained stubborn and specific, even as the reason for it stayed just out of reach. I pressed my back against the rock, pulled the Mylar blanket tighter, and aimed the flashlight at the wall of rain beyond the overhang's edge. Then I began signaling. 3 short flashes, 3 long, 3 short. SOS, the oldest call there is, older than phones, older than radio, older than almost everything, except the human need to say, I am here, I am still here, please find me. I signaled until my arm ached. Then I switched arms and signaled some more. I am still here. I found out later that Jake Mercer had been running search grids since 4 in the morning. He told me this himself, sitting in the chair beside my hospital bed, with his ranger hat in his hands, and his voice carrying the careful flatness of a man describing something that had frightened him badly, but which he had processed into procedure. His team had located the wrecked SUV at first light, crushed under the oak driver's side, caved completely uninhabitable. They had found no body at the scene, which meant either the water had taken me downstream or I had made it to high ground. Jake had bet on high ground. Why? I asked. My voice came out rough, scraped raw from coughing up creek water. The emergency kit was gone from the line. He looked at me steadily. Whoever took it knew what to do with it. That's not a panicking person. That's someone who's kept their head. I had kept my head. Barely, but enough. The rescue team's drone had picked up my Mylar blanket's reflective surface at 7:43 in the morning, a glinting irregularity against the gray rock face that the thermal camera confirmed as a heat signature. The helicopter came 20 minutes later, and I have to tell you that the sound of rotor blades cutting through mountain air is the most beautiful sound I have ever heard in my life, including the first cry of my son when he was born, including Margaret saying yes when I proposed, including Emma's laugh. I am not ashamed of that hierarchy. They lowered a medic named Torres, who was approximately 30 years old, and moved with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had done this in worse conditions and would do it again. Mr. Carter. She crouched beside me on the ledge, her hands already moving over my shoulders, my neck checking pupils with a penlight. Can you tell me your name and where you are? William Carter. Great Smoky Mountains, Tennessee. I tried to stand, and my left ankle betrayed me completely. I crumpled sideways, and Torres caught me under the arm with a grip like a dock cleat. Stay down, sir. We've got you. Her voice was warm and matter-of-fact. On a scale of 1 to 10, where's your pain? The ankle is an 8, what I said. Everything else is manageable. You're hypothermic, mild to moderate. She wrapped a proper thermal blanket around me, the thick, insulating kind, and the difference from the Mylar sheet was immediate and enormous. You did the right things up here. The heat packs the blanket, you probably saved your own life. I had good materials. I looked at the emergency kit bag beside me. Someone packed that bag well. She glanced at it. Those kits are standard issue for our district. Station Chief Mercer redesigned them about 2 years ago, added the heat packs, upgraded the blanket spec. She said it without emphasis, just professional information. I filed it away. The airlift to LeConte Medical Center took 11 minutes. They had me on a gurney and through triage and into a treatment bay within 20 minutes of landing. An orthopedic resident named Dr. Marsh confirmed what I already suspected: left ankle fracture, non-displaced boot, had functioned as a splint and almost certainly prevented it from becoming something much worse. Ribs bruised, not broken. Core temperature low, but recovering. Multiple lacerations on hands and forearms, none requiring sutures. You're a lucky man, Mr. Carter, Dr. Marsh said, writing notes without looking up. I'm a prepared man, I said. There's a difference. She looked up at that, half-smiled, and went back to her notes. They moved me to a private room mid-afternoon. The bed was firm and white, and the most comfortable surface I had been horizontal on in 18 hours. I lay there with my ankle elevated and my hands folded on my chest, and I stared at the ceiling, and I let myself feel it, all of it. The terror I had not permitted during the crisis, the grief I had held back on the rock shelf, the cold truth of what my son had done. My eyes burned, my throat locked up. I pressed the back of my wrist against my mouth and breathed through my nose, but this time the 4-count technique was not enough, and the tears came anyway, not sobbing, not dramatic, just a slow, quiet leaking that I could not stop and eventually stopped trying to. I cried for Ethan, not in anger, in mourning the way you mourn something that has died. I was still red-eyed and raw when the door opened, and a man in a park ranger uniform stepped into the room, hat in hand, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee from the machine down the hall. He was perhaps 38 broad through the shoulders, with a face that was honest and tired and careful, the way faces get when people have spent years dealing with other people's worst days. "Mr. Carter." He set one of the cups on my bedside table. "I'm Jake Mercer, Station Chief, Sugarlands District. I was the ranger on the far bank last night." He paused. "I owe you an apology that we couldn't get across the water faster." "You got your rope across," I said. "That's what mattered." He pulled the chair to the bedside and sat turning his hat slowly in his hands. For a moment he studied my face with an expression I couldn't quite read, searching almost tentative the expression of someone working up to something. "Mr. Carter," he said carefully, "can I ask, are you from Columbus originally? Did you work in structural engineering? Bridges specifically?" My chest tightened for a reason I couldn't immediately name. 35 years. Why?" Jake Mercer looked down at his hat. His jaw worked once. When he looked back up, his eyes were bright with something he was keeping controlled with visible effort. "In 1983, he said, there was a scaffolding collapse on the Scioto River Bridge project outside Columbus. 2 workers went down. One of them was my father." His voice stayed steady, but only just. "A young engineer pulled him out before the second section came down. My father said the man wouldn't even wait for a thank you, just said it was the right thing to do and walked away." He stopped, swallowed. "My father talked about that man for the rest of his life, Mr. Carter. Every time I said I wanted to quit something hard, every time I said something wasn't worth the effort, he would tell me about the engineer on the Scioto River Bridge." A pause. The name on the incident report was William Carter. The room tilted slightly. Not from the medication. From 42 years collapsing into a single moment. I opened my mouth and found I had nothing to say, not because the words weren't there, but because they were all there at once, too many to choose from. My eyes burned again. I pressed my lips together hard and looked at the ceiling for a moment, blinking. "Your father," I finally managed. "Is he? He passed 2 years ago." Jake's voice caught on the last word, and he cleared it, pressing on. "But he made me promise. If I ever crossed paths with you, I was supposed to say thank you." He met my eyes directly. "So, thank you, Mr. Carter, for giving my father 42 more years, for giving me the chance to exist." His voice broke on the last word just slightly, just at the edge. I reached out and put my hand over his. My hand was bandaged and battered and not much to look at, but it was warm and it was there. "Your father raised a man who drove toward a flood instead of away from it," I said, and my own voice was not entirely steady. "That tells me everything I need to know about him." Jake pressed his lips together and nodded, looking down at his hat again. Outside the window, snow had begun to fall on the mountains, soft and clean, and covering everything that the night had broken. I thought about Ethan, who had stepped over me into a rescue rope. I thought about Jake Mercer, who had spent 42 years waiting to say thank you. I thought about the staggering randomness of what people choose to carry forward and what they choose to leave behind. And I thought quietly, carefully, the way you think things that you know will change everything once you finish thinking them, that I was not going home the same man who had left Columbus 4 days ago. Before I tell you what I saw on that phone screen, something that made my blood run completely cold, I need to know you're still with me. Drop the number 9 in the comments right now. Just the number. That's all I need to keep going. A quick note. Some details in this story have been shaped for storytelling and reflection. If that's not for you, this is a perfectly fine place to step away, no hard feelings at all. 2 days after Jake Mercer sat beside my hospital bed and made me cry with a thank you, that was 42 years overdue. A nurse brought my phone in fully charged, screen clean, sitting on a small tray like an offering. "Someone left this at the front desk with your name on it," she said cheerfully, along with a note that just says, "When you're ready." I recognized Jake's handwriting on the note without needing to be told. I held the phone for a long time before turning the screen on. My bandaged hands made the grip awkward, and I told myself that was why I was taking so long. It was not why I was taking so long. When I finally pressed the power button, the notifications came in like a wave, breaking one after another after another. The little icons stacking up in the corner of the screen: Facebook messages, missed calls, voicemail. 47 missed calls. I stared at that number. 47. From people who believed they were calling a dead man, which meant none of them were calling to speak to me. They were calling to speak about me, to each other, to arrange things. I opened Facebook. Ethan's profile appeared at the top of my feed, because of course it did. The algorithm surfaces grief the same way it surfaces everything else, efficiently and without mercy. His profile picture was his wedding photo. The post below it had a black border. "It is with profound heartbreak that our family announces the passing of William James Carter, beloved father and grandfather, who was lost in a tragic accident in the Great Smoky Mountains on December 20th, 2025. Dad, you were our foundation, our compass, our greatest example of what a man should be. We will carry you with us every day. Rest easy, old man, you've earned it." Posted at 6:53 in the morning on December 21st, 11 hours after he left me in the flood. My chest cracked open. Not metaphorically, I mean I felt it physically, a pressure behind my sternum, like something structural giving way. My hands were shaking so badly, the phone rattled against the bed rail, and I had to grip it with both palms to hold it still. "You were our foundation, our compass." I read those words 3 times. Each time they hit differently. The first time raw pain, the kind that takes your breath. The second time something harder and colder moving in underneath the pain. The third time a clarity so sharp it almost didn't hurt anymore. He had written that eulogy before he left me on that mountain. Nobody writes like that in 11 hours of grief. That prose was prepared. Those sentences had been drafted and revised and set aside for the right moment, and the right moment had arrived on schedule. I scrolled down. The comments were endless: friends, neighbors, former colleagues, people whose names I recognized, and people I had never heard of, all of them offering condolences to my son for the loss of a father who was currently lying in a hospital bed in Gatlinburg, reading their messages with burning eyes and a jaw clenched so tight it ached. Then I found Olivia's comment. "He was the best father-in-law anyone could ask for. We will carry him in our hearts forever." 89 reactions, 14 replies saying what a beautiful tribute. I put the phone face down on my chest and stared at the ceiling and breathed. The monitor beside me beeped its steady rhythm. Outside the window, the mountains were white with fresh snow, clean and beautiful, and entirely unbothered by the ugliness of human beings. "All right," I said out loud to myself, to Margaret, to the empty room. "All right." I picked the phone back up. I went to Olivia's Facebook profile, not Ethan's, Olivia's, and scrolled down to December 21st. There was the photo I had been half expecting and half dreading: Olivia in a black dress outside what appeared to be a funeral home or chapel, one hand raised to cover her mouth, eyes visibly red and swollen, the posture of a woman demolished by grief. The caption read, "Making arrangements for the most difficult goodbye. William, you deserved so much better than this world gave you." Posted at 2:17 in the afternoon, 7 hours after Ethan's announcement. Moving fast. Moving with the efficiency of people who have a timeline. I almost stopped there. I almost put the phone down and called Robert Hayes right then and there. But something made me scroll down through the comments, and 4 replies from the bottom, posted by a teenage girl whose profile photo showed her at what looked like a school dance, was a comment that had not been deleted. OMG. I saw your mom laughing with some guy in a suit outside like an hour before this was taken. Well, is she okay? The comment had 6 likes. Nobody had replied to it. Nobody had deleted it, probably because nobody had seen it in the flood of condolences above it. My thumb hovered over the screen. I took a screenshot. Then another of the original post. Then Ethan's eulogy. My hands had stopped shaking, not because the pain had lessened, but because something had shifted in me the way a broken bone stops being an emergency once you've splinted it. The immediate crisis was over. Now came the work. I opened my contacts, found Robert Hayes, stared at his number. Then I closed the app, set the phone on the bedside table, and looked out at the snow on the mountains one more time. Not yet, I said quietly. Not until I know everything. Dr. Marsh came in on the morning of December 25th with her clipboard and the expression of a woman who already knew she was going to lose this argument. "Mr. Carter," she said, "I have you scheduled for 3 more days of observation. The ankle needs—" "I need to discharge today," I said. "I'll sign whatever you need me to sign." She pulled the chair over and sat down, which told me she was taking this seriously. "Your core temperature only normalized yesterday. The fracture needs immobilization and rest, not a 7-hour bus ride. I understand the risks. Do you have somewhere to go because your emergency contact—" She glanced at her clipboard. "Lists an Ethan Carter, and when we called that number 3 days ago, the person who answered told us you had passed away." She said it carefully, watching my face. My jaw tightened. "That number is no longer accurate. I have a friend in Columbus, a lawyer named Robert Hayes. I spoke with him this morning." I had called Robert from the room phone at 6 a.m., keeping it short, keeping it simple. "Robert, I'm alive. I need to see you. Don't tell anyone." 3 seconds of silence on his end, then, "Come straight to my office. I'll be there." That was all we needed. 35 years of friendship compressed into 8 words. Dr. Marsh studied me for a long moment. Then she set the clipboard down. "Mr. Carter, I've worked emergency medicine for 12 years. I've seen people rush out of this hospital for good reasons and bad ones." She leaned forward slightly. "Whatever is happening, be careful." "I intend to be." She signed the discharge papers without further argument. I respected her for that. Jake was waiting in the hallway. He had driven up from the ranger station without being asked. I had mentioned Robert's name on the phone, and Jake had simply appeared at my door 40 minutes later, with a bag of clothes borrowed from a ranger whose build was approximately mine, and a coffee from the machine down the hall. "You don't have to do this," I told him. "The Greyhound station is in Sevierville," he said, handing me the coffee. 45 minutes. You can't drive with that ankle, and you're not taking a rideshare with your real name attached to it." He said it matter-of-factly, like a man reviewing a logistics problem. "Let's go." I pulled on the borrowed clothes flannel shirt, heavy canvas jacket jeans that were slightly too long, and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I barely recognized the face looking back. Older somehow, despite only 4 days having passed. The lacerations were healing into thin, dark lines across my cheekbones. My eyes had the particular quality of eyes that have seen something they cannot unsee. "Carter," I said to the mirror quietly, "you look terrible." The man in the mirror almost smiled. Jake drove carefully on the mountain roads, which were still wet and sand-strewn from the flood response. We didn't talk much for the first 20 minutes, just the engine and the wipers, and the mountains sliding past the windows in the pale Christmas morning light. The town of Gatlinburg below us was lit up with holiday decorations, cheerful and oblivious Christmas wreaths on every lamppost. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said finally. "Go ahead. The people who were with you in that car." He kept his eyes on the road. "Your son, Are they going to come looking for you? I thought about the 47 missed calls, about the eulogy posted in 11 hours, about Olivia's hand going to the waterproof bag before it went to her husband's face. They think I'm dead, I said. They're not looking. They're moving. Jake's hands tightened on the wheel slightly. Moving how? That's what I need to find out. He didn't push further. That was one of the things I was already coming to appreciate about Jake Mercer. I knew when a question had been answered as completely as it was going to be answered. The Greyhound station in Sevierville was a small building that smelled of diesel and old upholstery, and the particular melancholy of bus stations everywhere, which is the melancholy of people going somewhere they are not sure they want to go. On Christmas morning it was nearly empty, a young woman sleeping across 2 seats with a coat over her face, an elderly man reading a paperback, a teenager staring at his phone. Nobody who would remember a 69-year-old man with a slight limp buying a cash ticket to Columbus. I paid cash. Robert had coached me on that in the phone call. Cash only. No cards. Your cards will show Ethan you're alive before you're ready. Jake carried my bag to the platform. We stood there in the cold, the bus idling 20 feet away, and Jake held out his hand. I shook it, but I held it a moment longer than a handshake requires. Your father would be proud of you, I said. My throat was thick. Not because of last night, because of who you turned out to be. Jake's jaw worked hard. His eyes went bright and he blinked it back with visible effort, pressing his lips together. Take care of yourself, Mr. Carter. His voice came out rougher than usual. Whatever you're walking into, don't let them make you feel small. You hear me? I hear you. I climbed onto the bus, found a seat at the back. Window side. The bus pulled out of Sevierville and turned north, and I watched Jake's truck in the parking lot until it disappeared behind a curve in the road. Then I was alone. The bus rolled through Tennessee in Christmas morning. Quiet small towns with their lights still up, gas stations open, a church parking lot full of cars. I watched it all pass and felt the strange doubled sensation of a man who is both grieving and planning, both broken and building, both at an ending and a beginning. My phone, the temporary one I'd bought at a pharmacy near the hospital, had Robert's number stored and nothing else. I turned it over in my hands. In Columbus, a man named Dennis Holt was presumably spending Christmas morning not knowing that the asset he had spent 10 months planning to liquidate was currently sitting on a Greyhound bus 40 miles south of the Kentucky border, very much alive, and thinking very clearly about what came next. I closed my eyes, felt the hum of the engine through the seat, thought about Margaret, who had always said I was at my best when I had a problem worth solving. All right, sweetheart, I said under my breath, let's go solve it. The bus crossed into Kentucky as the sun came fully up, flooding the fields on either side of the highway with cold gold light. 7 hours to Columbus. 7 hours to decide exactly who I was going to be when I got there. I had more than enough time. Robert opened his office door on Christmas morning, wearing a wool sweater and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and the moment he saw me leaning on a borrowed cane, wearing an oversized canvas jacket, my face mapped with healing lacerations. His face did something I had not seen it do in 35 years of friendship. It crumpled, just for a second. Then he pulled it back together with the practiced control of a man who has spent 4 decades in courtrooms where showing too much is a liability. But that second was enough. I saw it, and my throat tightened at the sight of it, because grief on Robert Hayes's face meant something. It meant that for the past 5 days, he had believed I was dead too. William. His voice came out rough, scraped at the edges. Robert. I stepped through the door, and he grabbed my arm. Not a handshake, not a hug, just a grip on my forearm, firm and immediate, the grip of a man confirming that what he is seeing is real. His hand was shaking slightly. Mine was too. Sit down before you fall down, he said, and steered me toward the leather chair across from his desk. "I'll get coffee. I need information more than coffee. You can have both." He disappeared into the small kitchen off the hallway and came back with 2 mugs set one in front of me and lowered himself into his chair with the careful movement of a man in his early 60s whose knees were registering their objections. He looked at me across the desk, really looked taking inventory. The lacerations, the boot cast, the weight I had lost in 5 days of hospital food and mountain cold. "Tell me everything," he said, "from the beginning." So I told him. All of it, the invitation, the road trip, the storm, the flood, the waterproof bag, the rope, the carabiner, the rock shelf, Jake Mercer, the hospital, the Facebook post, the comment about Olivia laughing outside the chapel. Robert listened without moving, without interrupting his coffee going cold in front of him, his reading glasses coming off his forehead and being turned slowly in his hands as I talked. When I finished, he put the glasses on the desk and exhaled through his nose. "How long?" I asked. "How long what? How long have you suspected something was wrong?" He met my eyes. 6 months. Maybe 7, though I only understood what I was seeing in the last 6 weeks. He met my eyes directly. Marcus Webb flagged the shell company in November. Before that, I had disconnected pieces, Dennis requesting unusual account access, a third-party valuation inquiry that seemed routine. None of it connected into a pattern until Marcus ran the cross-reference. He paused. "I was 4 days from bringing it to you when you left for Tennessee." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder, thick, tabbed, clearly assembled over time. "But I was building something solid, just in case." He laid the folder open between us. The first page was a property assessment, my property, all of it laid out in columns. The cabin, the 41 acres of adjacent forest land, the timber rights running through 2041, 2 lakeside lots 3 miles from the cabin that I had purchased quietly in 2018 and largely forgotten about. Total assessed value, current market, $18.3 million. I had known the number in the abstract, the way people know numbers that don't feel real. Seeing it on paper in Robert's careful handwriting made it land differently. "Ethan doesn't know about the timber rights," I said. "Or the lots." "No." Robert's voice was flat and precise. "But Dennis Holt does." My jaw tightened. "How?" "Because Dennis requested a full asset assessment 18 months ago through a third-party firm." Robert turned to the next page, a printout of what appeared to be an intermediary financial services report. "He used a shell company to make the request look routine. We only found it because Marcus Webb, he's a financial investigator I've used before, flagged the shell company in a cross-reference search." He paused. "Dennis Holt knew the full value of your estate, William. Every acre, every right, every lot. He knew things about your finances that you had not told him." The coffee mug in my hands felt very heavy. I set it down carefully. "And Olivia?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. Robert turned another page. "The debt is in her name, not Ethan's, hers." He laid a credit document on the desk, and I looked at it without touching it, the way you look at something you don't want to get any closer to. $340,000. Most of it from a Ponzi scheme that collapsed in March of this year. She invested everything they had, retirement savings, home, equity line, 2 personal loans, and lost it in 4 months. He looked up at me. "Ethan signed some of the loan documents, which means he knew about the debt. But the investment account was solely in Olivia's name. He may not have known how it happened." I pressed my fingers against my mouth, rubbed them back and forth slowly, the way I do when I am processing something my brain is resisting. "She recruited him," I said. "That's my assessment, yes." Robert's voice was careful and even. A desperate woman with a desperate plan and a husband, she could convince that the ends justified the means. He closed the folder. "Dennis provided the roadmap. Olivia drove. Ethan sat in the passenger seat. I stood up. My ankles screamed at the sudden weight, and I grabbed the desk edge, steadying myself, and Robert half rose from his chair, but I shook my head. I'm fine. I wasn't entirely fine, but I was upright, and upright was enough. I walked to the window slowly, carefully, boot cast, thumping on the hardwood, and looked out at Columbus in Christmas morning quiet. Snow on the sidewalks. A dog walker across the street, bundled so heavily only his eyes were visible. A city going about its holiday entirely unaware that inside this particular office, a 69-year-old man was reconstructing the architecture of a betrayal one load-bearing beam at a time. The guardianship petition, I said to the window. When was it filed? I heard Robert's chair move. How did you know about that? I didn't. Not specifically. I turned back to face him. But I know my son, and I know Olivia, and I know that when a plan has a backup, the backup is always the ugliest option. I watched his face. When? Robert opened the folder again to a page near the back. December 6th, 2 weeks before your trip. The room felt smaller. On what grounds? Diminished capacity. His jaw was tight with the effort of staying clinical. The petition included a psychiatric evaluation signed by a Dr. Gerald Foss, claiming cognitive decline consistent with early-stage dementia. He looked up at me. Dr. Foss had his medical license revoked in 2019 for falsifying patient records. My vision blurred for a moment. Not tears, something colder and more physical, the body's response to a certain quality of shock. I pressed the back of my hand against my forehead and breathed out slowly through my teeth. They were going to declare me incompetent, I said. If the cabin plan failed, yes. Robert's voice was very quiet now. With guardianship established, they could petition for control of your assets without requiring your signature. He paused. Dennis Holt's name is on the supporting documentation as the petitioning financial advisor. I stood there at the window of Robert's office on Christmas morning, 69 years old, alive by the grace of a granite overhang and a mylar blanket. And I felt the full weight of what had been built around me without my knowledge, the structure of it, the patience of it, the sheer deliberate architecture of people who had looked at my life and seen inventory. The anger came then, not hot, cold, the cold, precise anger of an engineer looking at a failure point and understanding exactly how it was engineered and exactly what it would take to bring the whole structure down. Robert, I said, turning from the window, I want to know everything, every document, every email, every name, all of it. My voice came out quiet and completely level. And then I want to know what it takes to make sure that not one of them walks away from this unchanged. Robert picked up his pen. The corner of his mouth moved not quite a smile, but the expression of a man who has been waiting a long time to hear exactly those words. Then let's get to work, he said. We worked through the morning and into the afternoon, Robert and I, his desk, disappearing under folders and printouts and handwritten timelines. 2 mugs of coffee replaced by 2 more, and then a plate of crackers someone had left in the kitchen that neither of us touched. By 2 in the afternoon, I knew the full shape of it. The 10 months of emails between Dennis and Olivia that Marcus Webb had flagged, but not yet fully decoded. The 3 meetings at a title company in Dublin, Ohio, Ethan Brian Dennis, a real estate broker, recorded in parking garage security footage that Robert had quietly requested through a civil discovery pre-filing. The notary in Gatlinburg, who had been contracted to appear at the cabin at noon on December 21st, which was the morning after the flood, which was the morning I had been lying on a rock shelf signaling SOS with a flashlight. If the mountain had not stopped us, that notary would have been waiting when we arrived. If I had not gotten free of the debris, he would have waited in vain for different reasons. I sat with that for a moment. The razor-thin margin of it, the way everything had pivoted on a lever of wet oak and rock, and then I pushed it aside because there was no useful place to put it. "I need to contact Emma," I said. Robert looked up from his notes. "That's a risk. If she mentions it to Ethan, Emma won't mention it to Ethan." I said it with the certainty of a man who has known his granddaughter since she was 4 hours old. She hasn't believed I was dead from the beginning. She told me once that she always knew when I was lying because my left eyebrow twitches. I looked at Robert. She has better instincts than anyone in that house. He slid his own phone across the desk, not mine, not the temporary one, his. "Use this, unregistered to you." I dialed Emma's number from memory. It rang twice and went to voicemail, her voice bright and careful. "Hey, leave a message and I'll call you back." I hung up. Tried again. On the third ring, she picked up, voice low and guarded the way teenagers answer unknown numbers. "Hello, Emma." Just her name. Just my voice saying it. The sound she made then, I cannot describe it perfectly. It was not a word. It was something that started in the chest and came out through the throat and had no language attached to it. The sound of a 14-year-old girl who had been holding herself together by pure determined force for 5 days and had just been given permission to let go. Her breath hitched. Then Grandpa. Barely a whisper. "Grandpa, oh my God, I'm here, sweetheart." My own voice cracked on the last word, and I pressed my fist against my mouth for a second, hard pulling myself back. "I'm okay. I'm in Columbus. I'm safe." She was crying now, not dramatically, not noisily, but steadily, the way people cry when they've been not crying for too long, and the dam finally breaks. "I knew it," she managed between breaths. "I told myself, I kept telling myself you couldn't be Grandpa. I knew. You were right." My eyes were burning badly. I looked at the ceiling and blinked. "You were right, and you were smart. And I need you to listen to me very carefully right now, okay? Can you do that?" A breath, two, then yes. "You cannot tell your father or your mother that we spoke. Not yet. Not until I say so." I kept my voice very even, very steady, the voice I used on job sites when I needed people to stay calm and do exactly what I said. I know that's a hard thing to ask, but it's important. I know. Her voice had steadied too, and the steadiness of it, the speed with which this 14-year-old girl pulled herself together and shifted into clarity, made my chest ache with something that was entirely love. "I haven't believed them this whole time, Grandpa. I didn't say anything because I didn't know what to say. You did exactly right." I paused. "Emma, I need to ask you something. The video you were making on the drive up, the road trip documentary, a beat of silence. Yeah. Do you still have the footage? All of it? Including anything that recorded while the phone was just sitting on the seat?" Another beat. Longer this time. I heard her moving footsteps, a door closing softly, the particular quality of a teenager finding privacy in a house full of adults. "There's one clip," she said slowly. "I almost deleted it because it's just like it's a weird angle, mostly the seat fabric. But there's audio." Another pause, and her voice went careful and very quiet. "Grandpa, I heard what she said. I didn't understand it when it happened, but I listened to it again after they said you were—" She stopped. "What did she say, Emma?" I heard her exhale shakily. "She said it's Olivia. She was on her phone. She said, 'He's going to sign everything at the cabin. Dennis already has the notary lined up. Your father is worth more dead than alive at this point, and we both know it.'" The words fell into the room like stones into still water. Robert, who had been listening, put his pen down very carefully and looked at me with an expression that I recognized from courtrooms, the expression of a lawyer who has just heard the thing that changes a case from difficult to winnable. My hand tightened on the phone. My jaw was so tight it ached. "Emma, I kept my voice careful and warm and completely controlled because she did not need to hear what was moving through me right now. I need you to do something very important. Without telling anyone, without mentioning it to anyone, I need you to send that video to this number right now. Can you do that? Already sending it, she said. Grandpa? Yes. Her voice dropped to something very small and very certain. Whatever you're going to do, make it count. Okay. My throat closed completely. I pressed the back of my hand against my eyes for a moment hard. I will, sweetheart, I said when I could say anything at all. I promise. The video arrived 40 seconds later. Robert and I watched it together, the shaky footage of the car seat, the muffled road noise, and then Olivia's voice cutting through the ambient sound with the clarity of someone who had no idea a microphone was 2 feet away. He's going to sign everything at the cabin. Dennis already has the notary lined up. Your father is worth more dead than alive at this point, and we both know it. Robert played it again. Then a third time. That's admissible, he said quietly. Recorded in a vehicle where the recorder was a passenger. Tennessee and Ohio are both one-party consent states. He looked up at me. William, this is the piece we needed. I looked at the phone screen at the waveform still visible on the paused video, the visual record of words spoken by a woman who had looked at my life and calculated its worth in dollars per acre. My hands were not shaking anymore. Who do we call first? I asked. Robert was already reaching for his phone. Marcus, he said. And then the DA's office. He looked up at me one more time, and this time the corner of his mouth moved into something that was unmistakably a smile, small, precise, and entirely without mercy. Merry Christmas, William. For the first time in 5 days, I almost smiled back. Robert's call to Marcus Webb went out at 7 in the morning on December 26th, and Marcus arrived at the office by 9 with a laptop bag over one shoulder and the focused, unhurried energy of a man who does his best work when everyone else is still eating Christmas leftovers. He was 52, compact, with close-cropped gray hair and the kind of face that was specifically designed to be forgettable in a crowd which Robert told me later was the single most valuable professional asset a financial investigator could possess. He shook my hand, looked at my bootcast without commenting on it, and set his laptop on Robert's conference table like a surgeon laying out instruments. Mr. Carter. His voice was dry and precise. I've been working this file for 6 weeks. I have to say I'm glad you're alive to see what I found. Show me, I said. He opened the laptop and turned it to face me. The first thing on the screen was an email chain, long, dense, the kind of correspondence that people write when they believe it will never be read by the wrong eyes. The sender address at the top was a Gmail account with a name that meant nothing, dh.consulting.private. But the recipient was immediately recognizable. Olivia's personal email. The chain dated back to February 14th, Valentine's Day, which struck me as almost darkly comic 10 months before the road trip. Dennis initiated contact, Marcus said, pulling his chair around so we could both see the screen. At this point, Olivia had been underwater financially for about 6 weeks. The Ponzi collapse was December of last year. She was desperate, and she was looking for options, and somehow Dennis knew that. He clicked to a specific email, highlighted a paragraph. Read this section. I leaned forward and read. I've done a full assessment of William's holdings, not just what he's told you, but what's actually there. The number is significantly larger than your family understands. If you're serious about exploring options, I can show you a path. Clean, legal on its face. Nobody gets hurt. William gets care he'll eventually need anyway, and your financial situation gets resolved. Call me. My stomach turned over slowly like a stone rolling in deep water. Nobody gets hurt, I said. That's what he wrote. Marcus's voice was flat and precise, carrying no editorializing. He didn't need to editorialize. The words did it themselves. The care he'll eventually need anyway is the guardianship petition. That was Dennis's idea from the beginning, not Olivia's. She provided the motive. He provided the mechanism. Robert leaned forward from across the table. What was his cut? Marcus clicked again. Another email 3 months into the chain. 12% of total asset value upon successful transfer. He looked at me directly. At 18.3 million, that's $2.1 million for Dennis Holt. $2.1 million. The number sat on the table between us like something physical. I pressed my back teeth together until my jaw ached. My hands flat on the table were absolutely still, but it was the stillness of effort of a man applying deliberate force to keep something contained that very much wanted to be otherwise. He sat in my living room, I said. My voice came out quieter than I expected. For 5 years. He sat in my living room and drank my coffee and asked about my health and told me my portfolio was looking strong. I stopped, breathed through my nose. He came to Margaret's funeral. Marcus waited, giving me that moment, which I appreciated. He came to her funeral. I said again, and this time something cracked in my voice on the last word, not breaking, just flexing the way timber flexes before it holds. I pressed my fist against the table once hard, and then I straightened and looked at Marcus. Show me the rest. The rest was worse. The email dated December 19th, one day before our road trip, was the one that made Robert stand up from his chair and walk to the window with both hands pressed to his mouth. Marcus read it aloud, his voice level and clinical, which was the only way to read something like this without the words becoming unbearable. Everything is in place. The notary will be at the cabin by noon on the 21st. Make sure he signs the property transfer authorization and the trust amendment before dinner. If he resists or asks questions, remind him it's estate planning. He's been meaning to update documents for years, he told me himself. If he absolutely refuses, we proceed to Plan B. The petition is filed and active. We won't need his cooperation. Plan B. The petition is filed and active. We won't need his cooperation. Plan B was me lying in a hospital bed being declared incompetent by a disgraced doctor's fraudulent evaluation, while my son's wife moved my assets into a trust she controlled. I stood up from the table. My ankle sent a bolt of pain up through my hip, and I grabbed the chair back hard, knuckles whitening, and welcomed the pain. It was clean and honest, and it helped me stay focused on what I needed to stay focused on. Marcus. My voice was steady now, the steadiness of something decided. What do you need from me to complete the evidentiary package? He looked up from the laptop with the expression of a man who had been hoping Common would ask exactly that question. Your testimony, a sworn affidavit about the events of December 20th, and your authorization to subpoena Dennis Holt's business records. Robert can file that today. You have all three. I looked at Robert, who had turned back from the window with red-rimmed eyes and his jaw set hard. File everything, today. Robert nodded once, sharp, decisive. Then he picked up his phone. Marcus was already typing. I walked back to the window where Robert had just been standing and looked out at Columbus in the gray December afternoon. The ordinary streets, the ordinary cars, the ordinary city going about its ordinary business. And I thought about Dennis Holt sitting somewhere in this city right now, possibly at his own family's Christmas table, possibly toasting the new year he believed was coming, a new year in which William Carter was dead and the assets were in motion and the plan was nearly complete. I thought about how completely wrong he was. Marcus, I said without turning from the window, one more thing. Sir, when this is over, I turned then and looked at both of them. I want him to understand exactly when it went wrong. I want him to know it was his own email that did it. I paused. Can you arrange that? Marcus looked at me for a moment. Then the corner of his mouth moved just barely, just enough. Mr. Carter, he said, that's the part I always enjoy most. 9 days after my son posted my obituary on the internet, I knocked on his front door. I had rehearsed nothing. Robert had offered to come with me, had actually insisted on it, standing in his office doorway with his coat half on, saying, William, at least let me drive you. And I had told him no with enough finality that he sat back down and took the coat off. This was not a legal matter yet. This was a father and a son, and those conversations do not benefit from witnesses. I drove Robert's car and parked 2 houses down from Ethan's place on Fenwick Drive at 7:15 on December 29th. I sat there for 4 minutes, not out of fear, but to give myself 4 minutes to be a father before I had to be something harder. The brick colonial looked exactly as it always had. Christmas wreath on the door, warm light in the windows. A life that looked from the outside like any other life. I walked up the front path, my boot cast thumping a slow rhythm on the brick, and knocked. Olivia answered. She was holding a glass of red wine, wearing a cream cardigan, her hair down the picture of a quiet evening at home. The moment she registered my face, the glass slipped. She caught it by reflex, but wine sloshed hard across her hand and sleeve. She didn't notice. She was staring at me the way a person stares at something that should not physically exist. William, barely a breath. Olivia. I kept my voice pleasant. Is Ethan home? Her mouth opened and closed. Her chest was rising and falling fast, her wine-wet hand pressing the doorframe as though she needed it to stay upright. You're alive, I offered. Yes. Then Ethan came around the corner from the kitchen, phone in hand, saying, "Who's at the—" and stopped dead. He stood 6 feet away, and his face cycled through shock terror, something almost like relief, and then a blank waiting stillness. His phone dropped to the hardwood. Neither of them moved to pick it up. Dad. His voice came out like something broken, like a man who had rehearsed the past tense of that word for 9 days and forgotten how to say it in the present. Hey son, can I come in? He stepped back, pure reflex, a child letting a parent through the door. I stepped inside. Then Emma appeared from the hallway in pajamas and socks. She saw me and her face broke completely open, raw, joyful, unguarded. Her knees buckled and she grabbed the wall, then crashed into me before I could take another step. She sobbed into my shoulder with the full, unrestrained grief of a teenager who had held it together for 9 impossible days. I've got you, I told her quietly. I've got you. Over her head, I watched Ethan's face dissolve. Not the calculated collapse of a man caught, but the genuine unraveling of someone who had been holding a terrible position for too long and was now remembering what it cost him. His eyes filled. He pressed his fist hard against his mouth, trying to hold something in that very much wanted out. I eased Emma back gently and looked at my son. We need to talk, I said. Not tonight. My lawyer will be in touch. I held his gaze steady and final. I wanted you to see me first, in person. I thought that was fair. Dad, Not tonight, Ethan. His chin dropped to his chest. I turned and walked back out. The night air was cold and clean. Then from behind me, Olivia's voice low and stripped of every warmth it had ever pretended to carry. Call Dennis, now. 3 words. And those 3 words confirmed everything I had left to confirm, not about Ethan, not about the money, but about who had been driving this from the very beginning. I sat in the driver's seat, picked up the phone, and called Robert. She just told Ethan to call Dennis, I said. A pause. Then Robert's voice, quiet and certain. Good. Let her. Robert said, good. Let her, and I understood exactly what he meant. Olivia calling Dennis the moment I walked off that porch was not a problem. It was a gift. Every call Dennis made from that point forward, every text, every email, all of it was flowing into a record that Marcus Webb and the Franklin County DA's office would eventually read with considerable interest. Desperate people communicate. Communicating people leave evidence, and evidence was the only currency that mattered now. I drove back to Robert's office through quiet Columbus streets, the city dark and cold, between Christmas and New Year's. Downtown emptied out traffic lights, cycling for nobody. When I walked through the door, Robert was already on the phone, pacing behind his desk, with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up. That was the closest thing to emergency mode I had ever seen from him in 35 years. He held up one finger, wait, and kept talking. Yes, December 20th. Sevier County, Tennessee, for the initial incident, but the conspiracy originates in Franklin County, Ohio, that gives us jurisdiction. A pause. The victim is present and fully cooperative. We have documentary evidence, recorded audio, financial records, and eyewitness testimony. Another pause. 9 o'clock Thursday. We'll be there. He hung up and looked at me with the expression of a man who has just moved a very large boulder into exactly the right position. Assistant D.A. Carver, he said. Financial crimes. She wants everything on her desk by Thursday morning. It's Monday night, I said. Then we have 62 hours. He pulled his chair out. Sit down, William. We're not sleeping much this week. Marcus Webb arrived 20 minutes later with 2 laptops and a portable hard drive. The 3 of us arranged ourselves around the conference table and began building what Marcus called the architecture of the case, his word, which I appreciated deeply given my profession. 6 folders, 6 independent lines of evidence, each self-sufficient, each capable of standing alone in a courtroom, even if the other 5 were challenged or excluded entirely. Walk me through all of them, I said. In order. Marcus opened folder 1. GPS telemetry from the SUV. Entire route from Columbus to the crash site rendered in a precise blue line, timestamps at every point. Ethan slowing, stopping, accelerating in the 30 minutes before the crash, consistent with someone who knew exactly where he was going and was timing his arrival deliberately. It directly contradicted any claim the location was accidental. Folder 2. Recovered deleted messages from Ethan's iPhone 14 text exchanges with Dennis Holt between December 8th and 19th. Discussing the trip, the timing, the notary. And once explicitly, once Dad signs, we're clear. Ethan had deleted every message on the morning of December 21st. The morning of Dad leaving me in the flood. Before search parties had finished looking for my body, my throat tightened. I breathed through it and kept my face level. Folder 3. Carrier records 3 calls from Olivia's cell to Dennis Holt's personal number the night of December 20th. First call at 20:09, 9 minutes after the crash site, GPS timestamp. Second at 20:31. Third at 23:14. She had called him 3 times in the 4 hours after leaving me in that water. Robert made a sound under his breath that was not quite a word. Folder 4. The guardianship petition filed December 6th by Dennis Holt, supported by a psychiatric evaluation signed by Dr. Gerald Foss. Dr. Foss had surrendered his medical license in 2019 for falsifying patient documentation. He had not been legally authorized to conduct psychiatric evaluations for 6 years. Filing a fraudulent court document in Ohio, a 4th-degree felony attached specifically to Dennis's name. Folder 5. Emma's video. Marcus played it once. Olivia's voice filled the conference room, clear and unhurried, the voice of a woman who had not known a microphone was 2 feet away. Robert pressed his lips together so hard the color left them. One-party consent. Both Tennessee and Ohio. Fully admissible. Robert pressed his lips together so hard the color left them. One-party consent. Both Tennessee and Ohio. Fully admissible. Folder 6. Security footage from a funeral home parking lot in Worthington. Olivia, in a black dress posture, assembled into careful grief, standing with a man in a dark suit, holding a real estate listing folder, both of them smiling. 47 minutes before the memorial service she had organized. The man was Patrick Greer, commercial real estate broker specialist in Tennessee mountain resort properties. His follow-up email to Olivia, sent the next morning, had the subject line, Re-Gatlinburg Portfolio Next Steps. The room was very quiet except for the hum of Marcus's laptops. I looked at the 6 folders on the table, not with triumph, not with satisfaction, with the feeling of a structural engineer who has completed a load analysis and confirmed the building will hold. The work was sound. The evidence was real. What happened next belonged to a courtroom, not this office, to rules and procedures that existed precisely for situations like this one. Marcus, I said, is there anything in these 6 folders a competent defense attorney could successfully challenge? He considered it honestly, which I respected. Folder 2, the deleted texts, could face a chain of custody argument on the carrier backup process. Unlikely to succeed, but possible. He paused. Everything else is clean. Then we go Thursday, I said. All 6. We give the DA everything. Robert nodded slowly. Then he leaned back, removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes with both hands, and exhaled a breath that carried 6 weeks of accumulated worry out with it. William, he said quietly, off the record, just between us. He looked at me directly. When this is completely done, what do you actually want? I thought about that honestly. Not the legal answer, not the strategic one, the human one. I want my granddaughter to be safe, I said. I want Dennis Holt to spend a meaningful portion of his remaining years regretting the email he sent on Valentine's Day. And I want to sit on the porch of that cabin in Gatlinburg and drink a cup of coffee without a single person in the world knowing exactly where I am. Robert studied me for a long moment. Then he picked up his pen. 2 out of 3 I can guarantee, he said. The third one that's yours to take. The arrest warrants were signed on the morning of January 3rd, a Friday, 3 days into a new year that Ethan, Olivia, and Dennis Holt had planned to begin very differently. I was not there when it happened. Robert had been clear from the beginning. You stay away from the arrests, William. You're the victim and the primary witness. Anything that looks like you orchestrated the physical confrontation gets weaponized by the defense. So I stayed in the hotel room where I had been living since Christmas, 4 miles from my own house, and I waited. Robert called at 7:43 in the morning. It's done, he said. All 3. I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, and breathed for a moment. Tell me. Ethan first. 2 detectives at the front door of Fenwick Drive at 7 in the morning, the same door I had knocked on 5 days earlier. According to the arresting officer's report, Ethan had opened the door in his bathrobe, seen the badges, and his legs simply gave out. He caught himself on the doorframe, knuckles, white, face gray, the physical collapse of a man whose body processed the truth before his mind was ready to receive it. He had not resisted. He had not argued. He had looked at the detective holding the warrant and said in a voice so quiet, the officer asked him to repeat it. Is my father okay? My throat tightened so hard it ached. I pressed the heel of my hand flat against my sternum and held it there. What did they tell him? I asked. That William Carter is alive and cooperating fully. Robert's voice was careful. He started crying at that point. The officer noted it in the report. I closed my eyes, kept them closed for a count of 5. Then I opened them and kept going. Olivia, I said. Robert's tone shifted, barely perceptible, but I had known him long enough to hear it. Collected at the same time, different officer. She was in the kitchen. A pause. She did not cry, William. She asked immediately for her attorney, gave her name, confirmed her address, and said nothing further. Not one word beyond the procedural minimum. Another pause, quieter. The detective described her as, and I'm quoting the report, unusually composed for someone being arrested on conspiracy charges. There was nothing useful to say to that. So I said nothing and moved on. Dennis. Robert's voice carried something I had never heard in it before, a thin, cold thread of satisfaction that a man of his professional restraint would never normally allow himself. He came in early. Building security shows his key card at 6:48. 2 financial crimes detectives and Assistant DA Carver met him in his own conference room. A deliberate pause. He had an attorney on the phone before they finished reading the charges. Told the detectives there had been a misunderstanding, that he had only ever acted in your best financial interest. How did that land? I asked. Detective Okafor put the December 19th email on the table in front of him. Robert's voice went precise and quiet. Everything is in place. The notary will be at the cabin by noon on the 21st. A beat. His attorney told him to stop talking. He stopped talking. I stood and walked to the window. My ankle protested. I let it. Outside, Columbus sat gray and bare in the early January cold, the city stripped to its bones the way it gets after the holidays, all the decoration gone, just the honest structure underneath. Emma, I said. Where is she? Carol Simmons, your neighbor. His voice warmed. Carol made her pancakes this morning and let her sleep until 10. Something in my chest loosened that I had not realized was still tight. Good, I said. That's good. My phone buzzed Robert's office line calling his cell. He saw it too. Hold on, he said. That's going to be what I think it is. 90 seconds on hold. When he came back, his voice carried the particular quality of controlled excitement that very contained people allow themselves only in exceptional circumstances. Ethan's defense attorney just called, he said. Ethan wants to cooperate. Full disclosure, no conditions. Complete account of Dennis Holt's role, every conversation, every instruction, every document. A pause. His attorney says Ethan wants to make sure his father knows the full truth came from him. I turned from the window, pressed my free hand flat against the wall, and stood there, forehead nearly touching the cold glass, looking out at the city without seeing it. My son. My boy who had unclipped a carabiner and left me in a flood. My boy who was now sitting in a police interview room asking to tell the truth so his father would know it came from him. The grief of that was enormous. The love underneath the grief was larger. Both things were true simultaneously, and I was old enough to stop being surprised by that. Tell the DA's office, I said when I could speak evenly. That decision belongs to them, not me. I straightened up. But tell Ethan, tell him that I heard. I'll tell him, Robert said. After we hung up, I stood at the window for a long time looking at the flat, white January sky. I thought about a rock shelf in Tennessee, a mylar blanket, a flashlight sending SOS into the dark. I had held on that night because holding on was the only thing that made sense. Now I understood something else. Holding on was not the same as holding tight. Sometimes it meant loosening your grip enough to let other hands carry the weight, Robert's hands, the law's hands, the careful machinery of justice, doing exactly what it was built to do. I picked up the hotel landline and dialed the number I had memorized. 2 rings, then a familiar voice, bright and careful. Hey, sweetheart, I said. How were the pancakes? Emma made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and entirely the best thing I had heard all morning. Carol puts blueberries in them, Grandpa. I think I live here now. I laughed. A real one from somewhere deep that had been shut for 2 weeks, and was only now at the sound of her voice remembering how to open. Pack light, I told her. When this is over, I'm taking you somewhere with better pancakes. Where? I looked out at the bare winter trees and thought about a cabin porch and mountain air and the sound of nothing complicated for miles in every direction. Somewhere with mountains, I said. I'll tell you when we get there. Franklin County Courthouse smelled like carpet cleaner and old paper and the institutional cold of a building that processes human suffering as daily routine. I had been in courtrooms before the depositions contract, disputes the ordinary legal machinery of a long career. Never to watch my son stand where Ethan was standing now. Robert walked beside me through the heavy wooden door. The room was smaller than I expected. 8 rows of benches half full. 2 tables facing forward, attorneys arranging folders. Ethan sat at the left table in a gray suit I had never seen before, bought for this occasion, which struck me as one of the saddest small details of the entire situation. Thinner than he had been 19 days ago, hair combed carefully, hands flat on the table. When I walked in, he looked up. He looked at me the way a man looks at something he caused, and cannot uncause the full weight of it behind his eyes, nothing hidden. His face crumpled at the edges. His jaw worked hard. He looked away, first pressing his lips together until the color left them. Olivia sat at a separate table, posture, immaculate expression, impenetrable eyes fixed on the judge's bench, like a woman already preparing her next performance. She did not look at Ethan. She did not look at me. Robert presented the 6 folders in order. I had watched him build them across 3 days of late nights and cold coffee, but watching him lay them on the prosecution table one by one, each one a different wall of the same inescapable structure, was different from building them. Like watching a building you designed actually rise from the ground. Folder 1. GPS telemetry. No objection. Folder 2. Deleted texts. Ethan's hands pressed harder against the wood. Folder 3. Olivia's phone calls to Dennis the night of the flood. Folder 4. The guardianship petition with Dr. Foss's revoked license. This was the one that broke him. I watched the information land on Ethan in real time, his shoulders dropping, his head dipping forward, a man absorbing something his body cannot hold upright. His eyes went bright and wet. He pressed the back of his hand hard against his mouth. He had not known. About the petition. About Plan B. About what he had been part of without understanding its full depth. It did not make him innocent. But it made him something more complicated than guilty, and complicated is always harder to carry than simple. Folder 5. Emma's video. Olivia's voice filled the courtroom. Your father is worth more dead than alive. Ethan pressed both hands over his face. His shoulders shook once. He pulled himself back with visible, enormous effort. Folder 6. Security footage. Olivia smiling with a real estate broker 47 minutes before my memorial service. Ethan looked at the footage. Then he looked at his wife. She did not look back. Her jaw was set, eyes forward, the posture of a woman who has made her calculations and will not flinch from them. Whatever Ethan had believed about their marriage left his face in that moment replaced by something raw and entirely too late. His attorney requested a recess. 4 words came back through the closed door. He's pleading guilty, fully. The afternoon session was quieter, heavier. The atmosphere of a room where fighting has stopped and only consequence remains. Robert read the will amendment at 4 o'clock. Emma sat in the second row beside Carol Simmons, hands folded, eyes very bright. The sole beneficiary of the William James Carter Family Trust is Emma Caroline Carter. He paused. The room held its breath. To Ethan James Carter and Olivia Marie Carter, $1 each. Not a sound. Then Robert lifted the handwritten addendum, the page I had written myself on December 27th, certain enough of the ending to write it down. This is not punishment. This is protection for the only person in this family who never needed to be reminded what love means. Emma's breath came out in a rush. Her hand flew to her mouth. Carol pulled her close, and Emma pressed her face against Carol's sleeve, her whole body shaking with something larger than grief, the feeling that arrives when a person is seen completely and valued truly, perhaps for the first time. My eyes were burning so badly I could not see the room. I looked at the ceiling and blinked hard until I could. When the session ended, Ethan stopped beside me. His attorney had told him to keep moving. He shook his head. He looked at me, eyes red-faced, devastated in the way that only real reckoning produces. No performance, no strategy, just a man standing in the wreckage of his own choices. I'm sorry, Dad. Barely audible, wrecked and raw and without excuses. I'm so sorry. I looked at my son. My boy. Margaret's boy. The 10-year-old who used to bring me coffee with too much sugar because he thought that was how adults drank it. I know, I said. Not forgiveness, that was a longer road and we were only at the trailhead. Not rejection, just the truth. He nodded chin to chest and his attorney guided him forward. I turned toward the exit and found Jake Mercer standing in the back row, hat in hand, civilian clothes, 4 hours from Gatlinburg, unannounced. He raised one hand slightly. I'm here. I raised mine back and he fell quietly into step beside me as I walked toward the door. 3 weeks after the hearing, I drove to Gatlinburg alone. No one checking the glove compartment. No waterproof bag. No agenda. Just me and 7 hours of highway and the mountains growing larger in the windshield, the way they always do, slowly, then all at once. The cabin looked exactly as it always had. Weathered pine siding, stone chimney, the wide front porch Margaret had insisted on, and I had built wider than the plans specified, because she was right about most things, and I knew it even then. I sat in the car for a moment before going in. Okay, sweetheart, I said quietly to the dashboard and to the woman who was not there and was always there. Here we are. Inside smelled of wood smoke and cold pine, slowly warming the smell of every good memory the place had ever held, patient and concentrated, waiting for someone to come back and let them breathe. I built a fire, made coffee in the kitchen Margaret had designed, and carried a mug out to the porch. The Great Smoky Mountains, in late January, are not the mountains of the tourist brochures. They are bare and severe and magnificent in the way that things are magnificent when they have stopped pretending to be anything other than what they are. I sat in the wooden chair, the one Margaret had painted green 3 summers before she died. The paint now weathered to a soft sage, and I did not think about anything requiring resolution. Jake arrived at noon, with sandwiches from a Gatlinburg deli, and the easy company of a man who knows when words are necessary and when they are not. We ate on the porch. A hawk circled below the ridgeline, riding a thermal with the patience of something that has been doing this for 10,000 generations. How did it feel? Jake asked. Walking out of that courthouse, like putting down something very heavy, I said. You don't notice how much you've been carrying until you're not carrying it anymore. He nodded. Then he told me what his father used to say, that the thing that saves a man is rarely the thing he thinks is saving him. That what kept his father going for 42 years wasn't the rescue itself. It was the proof that a stranger had chosen to do right for no reason except that it was right. My throat tightened. I looked at the hawk and held myself level. Your father gave me something too, I said. On that rock shelf in the dark, when I found that card with your name, I couldn't remember why it was familiar. But it was a loose end. And loose ends mean you're not finished yet. Jake's jaw worked. He turned back to the mountains and gave himself a moment, which I gave him freely. Then my phone buzzed. Emma, Grandpa. Her voice was barely containing something enormous. I submitted my application. Architecture. University of Tennessee, Sustainable Mountain Construction. A beat. I kept thinking about everything you told me about building the cabin. I just knew. My eyes burned. I pressed my fingers against the bridge of my nose and held them there. You know that's 4 hours from this porch, I managed. I know, she said, and I could hear her smiling. That's kind of the point. I laughed, a real one from somewhere deep that had been locked up for 2 weeks and was only now remembering how to open. Jake raised his eyebrows. I shook my head. Later, after Jake left his truck crunching down the gravel drive, the sound fading into the mountain quiet, I sat in the green chair until the light went gold, then amber, then the first cold blue of evening spread from the east. I thought about Margaret standing on this porch in the first summer we owned this land, pointing at the view and saying to no one in particular, "This is worth everything we paid for it and more." She had been right. I pulled my jacket tighter and stayed until the last light was completely gone, because some evenings deserve to be seen all the way through. And because I had learned on a rock shelf in a hospital room, in a courtroom, in all the places this season had taken me, that the difference between a man who survives and a man who truly lives is simply this: the willingness to sit still long enough to feel the weight of what he has been given. I had been given more than I deserved, and less than I lost, and exactly enough to go on. The mountains held their ground around me, indifferent and magnificent, unchanged by flood or courtroom or anything small enough to have a name. I was still here. Tonight, that was sufficient. There is something I have learned, not from books, not from engineering, but from a mountain that nearly killed me, and a grandson's video that saved me, that I want to say directly to you. I am 69 years old. I built bridges for 35 years. I thought I understood load-bearing structures. What I did not understand until this winter was that the most dangerous weight a man can carry is the weight of misplaced trust, the kind you hand to people simply because they share your last name. God put me on that rock shelf for a reason. Not to punish me, to wake me up. And I am grateful, genuinely, completely grateful that he did. So here is what I want to tell you from one imperfect human being to another. Do not do what I did. Do not spend so many years being someone's foundation that you forget to protect your own. Do not mistake silence for peace or obligation for love. The people who truly love you will never need you to disappear. They will make room for you at the table every single time. These are grandpa stories nobody plans to live. These are family stories that begin with a holiday and end in a courtroom. These are grandpa stories that remind us quietly, painfully, permanently, that love without boundaries is not love. It is an open door to the wrong people. In my personal opinion, and I say this as a man who has earned the right to say it, your dignity is not negotiable. Not at 69, not at any age. If this family story moved something in you, I would love to know. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you felt, what you remembered, what you want to say to someone you love. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe that stories like this matter, subscribe to this channel, because there are more voices here that deserve to be heard. Thank you truly from the bottom of my heart for staying with me until the very last word. And one gentle reminder before you go: the stories ahead contain fictional elements crafted entirely for reflection and heart. If that is not the journey you are looking for today, no hard feelings. Choose what feeds your soul. We will be here when you are ready.